Hi there, welcome back to the Community of Readers video blog. We're following the Old Testament readings for the Monkey Bar Challenge, and this week we're looking at the whole of the book of Joshua. This is called Mission and Massacre. Well, this is it. After months of reading, we finally journey with the Israelites into the Promised Land. The book of Joshua tells the story of the gradual domination of the land of Canaan by the Israelites, the land sworn on oath to their fathers Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. But if reading the book of Joshua isn't an emotional roller coaster, then you have not read it right. We can't help but brim with pride as we've followed this people for so long and sense their relief as they finally get to move into this new land, let alone to be relieved at the sense of the faith in Yahweh, so new in the ancient world, having the stability in which it can be preserved. And yet at the same time we shudder at the story of genocide. It reminds us of how we felt at the Bosnian Rwandan massacres of the 1990s. This is a deeply shocking story. Joshua is a tale that should offend us to our very core. But we can't just write it off as nationalist propaganda, though that is absolutely what it is. Our wrestling with the Bible is like Jacob's wrestling with the Lord at Peniel. We may come away limping, but we will be the better for it. It's almost impossible to imagine what life was like in the ancient world of the Israelites over 3,000 years ago. There was no sense of the globalized peace-seeking world in which we now inhabit. It was just taken as a given that you defended your land against your neighbours and that you had to capture workable land in order to survive. That Israel's law even specified generous provision for foreigners was forward-thinking in its time. No one would expect Israel to have mercy on their neighbours, just as no one would expect Israel's neighbours to have mercy on them. In some ways, the total destruction of the land and its people groups is a triumph of leadership for Moses and Joshua, who presumably felt that without that, the covenant with Yahweh would have been compromised. And more pragmatically, without workable land with which they could farm and grow crops, well, they wouldn't survive. They certainly weren't going to be able to survive the desert just ad infinitum. Survival required them to do something, and there was no United Nations that they could appeal to for international jurisdiction. And Joshua is an important piece of covenant narrative, much like we said about the Pentateuch, that there is a great deal of narrative interspersed with the legal code, because the narrative proves that the suzerain of the covenant will deliver. And Joshua is no different. In the battle with the armies of Adonai-Zedek, it's Yahweh who stops the sun and showers the opposing army with hailstones, bringing about a great victory for the Israelites. Once again, Yahweh proves that he delivers. But there is a deep problem with the Israelites' faith. That it had become blinkered to the point of violent oppression. They invade a land that is not their own, however much it's promised. And babies, old ladies, strong men, happy children are cut down down by the hundreds, if not thousands, as the Israelite war machine tears up the land in its bitter teeth. We feel the pain of Ai, of Jericho, of Hebron, of Jarmuth, and the others. And we have to ask difficult questions about this people group. Our sense of respect and sympathy for their journey and their plight turns to a deep misgiving about their agenda, and certainly about the methods and values of their suzerain protector, Yahweh. This is the point, I think, in the Old Testament narrative where we have to take seriously how different the Yahweh of the Israelites is at times from the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Obviously, Jesus Father is in some way the Yahweh of his Jewish heritage. The danger is that we just conflate the two. We just assume that they're the same, that there's no difference whatsoever. But if it is Yahweh, it's definitely an evolution of that God. Because the God of Jesus is not interested in delivering any land on promise, despite all the covenant promises of the Old Testament. And there is no dissolution of neighbouring states, no demolition of neighbouring cultures. Quite the opposite. They are respected. And there is no violent murder, but instead a command to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. In some ways, Joshua and Jesus are no more similar than chalk and cheese. And yet somewhere hidden in this story of Joshua is the God of Jesus, the real Yahweh revealed in the New Testament, perhaps shrouded by earthquake, wind and fire, a still and small divine personality makes himself known within the text. It would take at least another 1,000 years or so, but in that holy land, another Joshua, the root of the name Jesus, would demonstrate a new covenant with Yahweh, this time signed and sealed in his own blood. The whole of the rest of the Old Testament will reverberate with the profound contradictions of the book of Joshua. On the one hand, hope and expectation. On the other, disgust and challenge. How should faith deal with outsiders? How should faith deal with the goal of being pure and keeping to what it's about? To what extent do we fight for our faith? And when does fighting for faith undermine it? Joshua welcomes us into those tensions. The Old Testament will relive them time and again. And the New Testament offers a whole new approach, still being tested by the church.